Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're not just reading a document. I feel like we're staring into a very specific and, frankly, quite a startling abyss.
Yeah, abyss is a good word for it.
We've pulled a document from a collection labeled the Multiverse Journal, and it's specifically index number 2235. And I have to say, right off the bat, the energy of this text is different. It feels, I don't know, almost radioactive.
It is distinct, isn't it? It's a fascinating, if somewhat disturbing piece of writing. Usually we look at market trends or, historical analyses, but this is something else entirely.
Disturbing is putting it mildly. The entry is dated February 11th, 2026. That's a Wednesday, for those keeping track. And the title of this entry alone is enough to make you just sit up and pay attention. It's called The Apologetic of Exorcism and the Modernist Crisis.
It sets an incredibly high-stakes tone right from the header, doesn't it? This isn't a casual blog post or a diary entry about the weather. This is written as a formal, intensely religiously charged manifesto.
Oh, absolutely.
And the author begins with a very specific invocation, a prayer for the Holy Ghost's guidance, and an appeal to the Holy Virgin Mother, Mary, and all saints. It grounds the text immediately in, let's say, a pre-modern, almost medieval mindset.
Right. So immediately we know where the author's coming from. This is a person of, intense faith, but also clearly intense turmoil. The mission for our deep dive today is to really unpack what is happening in this text, because the author is making a radical, almost world-shattering assertion. It goes far beyond just the church is in trouble.
Oh, miles beyond. The central thesis is effectively that the Vatican, the institutional heart of the Catholic Church, has been captured. And we're not just talking captured by bad management or corrupt officials or even a political ideology. In the author's view, it's been metaphysically captured by its absolute antithesis.
Yeah, let's just rip the Band-Aid off here. The author claims that Vatican II was, and I'm quoting directly from the text, a public announcement that Satan has been enthroned there.
It's a shocking claim. And to understand it, to even begin to process it, we have to look at the context the source provides. This is from what's called a Journal Across Realities, Time, Space, Soul States.
Right.
So we are immediately dealing with a perspective that views history not just as a series of political events, but as a spiritual war zone. The author is looking at the physical world and seeing the spiritual mechanics underneath. And those mechanics, according to them, are fundamentally broken.
So we've got some heavy themes on the docket today. We're going to be talking about the Synagogue of Satan. We're going to dive into the modernist crisis. And this one really threw me for a loop, the concept of legal personhood rights for demonic entities.
That is a particularly unique element of this text, isn't it? It blends this medieval theology with modern corporate law in a way that is, it's quite terrifying. It suggests the spiritual war has moved into the courtroom.
It really is. So, the hook for today, the thing I want you, the listener, to keep in mind as we wade through this. Why does this author believe the church is currently a corpse? Not dying, but dead. A walking corpse.
Already dead. A zombie.
Yes. And what exactly happened in 1958 that, in their eyes, changed the entire course of human history?
That is the pivotal year. 1958. According to our source, that is the moment the timeline fractured. Everything hinges on that date.
Okay, let's unpack this. Section 1 of our dive today is all about that turning point, the 1958 turning point in the captured papacy. The author zooms in on the papal electoral college of that year. Now, for those who aren't, deep in church history, usually people point to the 1960s and Vatican II as the big change, but this author goes back further.
Correct. Way further back for the root cause. They refer to it as the cursed papal electoral college. They were looking for the origin point of the infection, not just the symptoms that appeared later. And the focus of their accusation is one man, Angelo Giuseppe Roncalli, who history knows as Pope John XXIII.
But this author does not see him as the benevolent, good Pope John that popular history might remember. The smiling, grandfatherly figure who wanted to open the windows of the church to let in some fresh air.
Far from it. The text describes him as demonic-directed. It uses the phrase synagogue of Satan shapeshifting. It's extremely hostile imagery.
Shapeshifting?
Yes. It implies he was an infiltrator, a sleeper agent who had been waiting for this exact moment. But what's fascinating here, if we can look past the visceral insults for a second, is the specific mechanism of the capture that the author describes. It's a very legalistic, almost contractual, theological argument.
Yeah, I noticed that too. It wasn't just that Roncalli was a bad guy. It was about how he accepted the job. It's almost like a contract dispute with God.
Exactly. The author grants that Roncalli verbally accepted the papal office. He said the words, he went through the motions, he took the oaths, In the eyes of the world and under canon law, he became pope. No dispute there.
Okay.
However, the text claims he held a perverted internal intention.
An internal intention to turn the office inward for the body of Jesus Christ on earth. Soul murder. That is heavy. So the idea is that you can say all the right words, you can sign on the dotted line, but if your soul is crossing its fingers, so to speak, it changes the metaphysical reality.
That is the precise theological implication being drawn here. In sacramental theology, intention is absolutely crucial. For a sacrament to be valid, the minister must have the intention to do what the church does.
Like a priest baptizing someone.
Exactly. If a priest is just going through the motions, maybe as a joke, but internally wills not to perform the sacrament, the theology says it doesn't happen. It's null and void. The author is applying this exact principle to the papacy itself.
So they're scaling up a known theological concept to the highest office in the church.
Precisely. Because of this false witnessing, the author calls it, lying to the cardinals, lying to the church, and ultimately lying to God, the claim is that the Holy Ghost could not bless him.
Could not. That's interesting phrasing. It's not would not, as in a choice. It implies a blockage, a fundamental incompatibility.
Yes, that's the key. The spiritual connection, the divine link that is supposed to exist between God and the vicar of Christ was severed before it can even be established. The author writes that he occupied the office while being deaf to God's guidance.
And the term the text uses for this state is grace sterility.
Yes, grace sterility. That's such a powerful, devastating phrase, isn't it? It suggests that the machinery of the office continued to run, the bureaucracy, the ceremonies, the robes, the encyclicals. But the engine was empty. The lights are on, but nobody's home.
There was no divine fuel flowing through the pipes.
Yeah.
The chair of Peter became a dead zone, a spiritual black hole.
And that paints a picture of a hollow shell, which leads us directly to this metaphor of the corpse church that you mentioned earlier. The author has this incredibly visceral imagery of what they call the Catholic ape church.
Ape here likely meaning a mimic, right? A counterfeit.
I think so, yes. In a lot of traditional theology, the devil is often called the ape of God because he cannot truly create. He can only copy and distort what God has already made.
Right, a mimic. So the ape church is a grotesque copy. The imagery is gruesome. The text describes a grotesque, clown-painted face mask covering a rotting corpse.
It's the author's way of reconciling their deep faith with their lived reality. Think about it. If you believe the church is indefectible, that it is divinely protected and cannot fail, but you look around and see it doing things you believe are objectively evil, how do you explain that contradiction?
You can't say the church failed because that would break your faith.
Exactly. So the author resolves the paradox by saying the thing you see isn't the real church. It's a corpse wearing a mask. The true church is hidden somewhere else, or perhaps in eclipse, waiting.
And the current forms of the church, the structures we see, according to this text, are just there to mutilate, lobotomize, and sterilize the shoe believers. It's like a horror movie where the sanctuary has become the slaughterhouse.
And those words are chosen very carefully. Mutilate is obvious, but lobotomize implies taking away the ability to think, to reason with the traditional faith.
And sterilize.
Sterilize implies taking away the ability to reproduce, to create new saints, new believers, to pass the faith on. The author sees the modern church structure as a machine specifically designed to stop the reproduction of the faith, all while pretending to promote it. It's a soul contraceptive.
And this isn't a recent development in the author's eyes. This isn't something that just happened. This is what they call the long con. The text mentions that these plans were assembled since Jesus was hanging his cross.
That line, that gave me chills when I first read it. The idea that the opposition, the demonic forces, whatever you want to call them, started planning this takedown the moment the crucifixion was happening.
So while the central event of salvation was occurring,
the enemy was already digging the trenches for 1958. They were playing the long game, a 2,000-year-long game.
The text mentions the Star of Bethlehem alert as a marker for when this planning began.
Right. The idea is that the birth of Christ triggered a cosmic alarm. The star wasn't just a sign for the wise men. It was a flare that told the forces of darkness, he is here, the game has changed. And the counteroffensive has been in the works for 2 millennia, culminating in that one moment, in that one election in 1958, where they finally got their man on the throne.
It really establishes the scale of the conflict we're dealing with in this text. We aren't talking about church politics or liberal versus conservative factions. We are talking about a cosmic war that has been simmering for millennia.
Precisely. And that brings us to the nature of the enemy. Because if 1958 was the coup, who or maybe more accurately, what is running the show now. Because the author doesn't just stop at bad pope, they go into full-blown supernatural horror.
This moves us into section 2 of our dive, the enemy profile, and this is where the text gets incredibly vivid, almost hallucinatory. We are no longer just talking about bad people, we are talking about demons, corporations, and feeding.
The feeding concept is one of the most disturbing parts of this entire journal entry. The author describes a kaleidoscoping, vivid buffet of colors that radiate from human suffering.
And they use the word spicy. Spicy suffering. That's the word they used. It makes my skin crawl.
Yes. It suggests a palate. It suggests that these entities have preferences, like a gourmand. They don't just want generic sadness or boredom. They want fear, terror, agony of body, mind, and soul. They want the high-intensity emotions, the stuff that really burns.
And the author claims that these demons feed, nurse, and protect this suffering. That's a terrifying inversion of, the shepherd imagery.
It's a complete inversion.
Instead of protecting the sheep from the wolves, they're protecting the pain of the sheep because it's their food source. They're farming it.
It creates a symbiotic, utterly parasitic relationship between these demonic entities and human misery. If you are a demon and you eat terror, you don't want peace on earth. You don't want contentment. You want constant, low-level anxiety punctuated by spikes of absolute horror. You become a demonic husbandman, as the text says, a farmer of pain.
The text describes outline arm-like shapes reaching out to this suffering. It's very distinctive visual language, almost like the author is describing a vision they've actually had, like they can see this invisible world overlaid on ours.
It connects the abstract concept of evil to a very physical, almost biological process of consumption. But then, just when you think you're in a purely spiritual medieval text, the author pivots to demonic dragon corporations.
This is where the analysis becomes so strange and so modern. The author isn't just blaming spirits in the air, they're blaming demonic husbandmen who have created entities with legal personhood rights.
This is a brilliant, if utterly paranoid, synthesis of ideas. We hear about corporate personhood in the news all the time. Corporations having the rights of people, free speech, the ability to own property. This author takes that concept and pushes it to its most literal, horrifying conclusion.
They're not just legal fictions anymore.
No. They claim these entities walk the earth in semi-solid form.
Semi-solid form? What does that even mean? That's wild.
It implies they are interdimensional. Not quite ghost, not quite flesh, but they are anchored here in our reality by the law, by legal code. Think about the implications of that worldview for a second. If you believe that a demonic entity has incorporated itself as lawyers on retainer, has assets, and has the legal right to watch the earth, you are looking at a world where the legal system itself has been weaponized by hell.
It says they possess powers to destroy nations using weapons created by the synagogue of Satan. Again, we see that specific phrase being used as the R&D department for this whole operation.
We do. And we need to be clear, just for our listeners, that in the context of this source, that phrase, synagogue of Satan, is used to denote a specific conspiratorial group the author believes has been laboring in secret since Christ's ascension. It's a term loaded with a lot of historical baggage, often used in anti-Semitic contexts, and here it is framing the ultimate antagonists of this entire narrative. The author sees them as the architects of this legal demonic structure.
Right. And the goal of all of this, the end game for the demonic corporations and their creators, the text says, for Israel to cover the earth, the hellbud, and future earth.
It's a very confusing phrasing, hellbud. It implies a germination, a process, like a graft being placed on a tree. The goal isn't just destruction for destruction's sake, it's terraforming.
Terraforming earth into hell.
Exactly. They want to expand the bit of hell on earth, to make the conditions of hell, the suffering, the despair, the total separation from God, the default conditions of our reality.
So we have a captured papacy, we have corporate demons feeding on our agony, and we have a 2,000-year-old plan to turn Earth into an outpost of hell. It's a lot to take in, but the author doesn't just rant. They try to define the philosophical root of the problem. They need to explain how this happened.
Yes. This is where the text shifts from the visionary and the prophetic to the doctrinal and the academic, section 3, defining modernism. Because for this author, the demons didn't just walk in uninvited. They were invited in by a specific corrosive way of thinking.
And to do this, the author quotes Pope Pius X's encyclical from 1907, Pascendi Dominici Egregius.
A very famous or infamous encyclical among traditionalist Catholics. It was the Church's first major counterattack against this new way of thinking. And in it, Pius XX defined modernism as the synthesis of all heresies.
That's a bold claim. Not just a heresy, but the synthesis of all of them, like the Avengers of bad theology.
It's the ultimate enemy. The author uses this quote to anchor their entire argument. They want to show that this isn't their personal novel opinion. It's an established danger that the church itself was warned about over a century ago. The text argues that traditional dogma and modernism are unresolvable conflicts. You cannot have both. They are matter and antimatter. If they touch, they annihilate each other.
The text actually lists what it calls the 6 pillars of modernism. I want to go through these because the author seems to think these 6 ideas are the poison in the well. The first one is agnosticism.
Right. But in this specific theological context, it's not just, I don't know if God exists. It's the philosophical belief that human reason cannot know God objectively. You can't prove or disprove his existence through logic.
So it takes God off the table as a subject of rational discussion.
Precisely. If you accept that, you remove the entire ability to argue for God as a fact. God becomes a feeling, a personal experience, not a reality you can point to. It undermines the whole project of apologetics.
Which undermines the whole project of religion, really. If you can't know God, why bother? Okay, the second one is immanentism.
This is the idea that religion arises from an inner feeling or a deep-seated need, rather than from an external revelation that comes down from the sky.
So God didn't speak from a burning bush. We just felt a need for a God, so we invented one.
That's the modernist interpretation, yes. If religion is just how we feel inside, then it's entirely subjective. It's not a law of the universe, it's a psychological coping mechanism. It has no more objective truth than your favorite color.
That leads right into number 3, vital evolutionism.
This one is huge. It's the belief that dogma evolves, that truth itself changes as human consciousness changes. What was true for people in the 13th century isn't necessarily true for us today.
I can see why a traditionalist would absolutely hate that. If the truth changes, then it was never really the truth to begin with.
Exactly. It makes truth unstable. It turns it into a moving target. If the church said for 1900 years that something was a mortal sin and then suddenly says it's fine because we've evolved, then the church was either wrong then or it's wrong now, or both. The author hates this because it turns God into a fad.
Number 4, symbolism.
This is the pillar that treats doctrines not as objective facts, like the statement Christ rose from the dead, but as powerful symbols of an inner subjective experience.
So the resurrection doesn't mean a man literally walked out of a tomb.
No. From this viewpoint, it means hope springs eternal in my heart, or it's a metaphor for overcoming personal struggles. It's a useful story. The author, of course, believes in the man literally walking out of the tomb. They see symbolism as a way modernism reduces miracles to nice stories about optimism. It guts them of their power.
Number 5 is historical relativism. This sounds familiar.
It's the idea that Scripture is a product of its time and must be reinterpreted for every new age. Oh, St. Paul only said that because he was a man of the first century. He didn't know about modern psychology, so we can ignore that part.
It's a way to dismiss anything in the Bible you don't like by blaming the calendar.
That's how the author sees it, yes.
Yeah.
As an escape hatch from uncomfortable truths. And finally, number 6, subjectivism.
This sounds like the culmination of all the others.
It is. It's the shifting of authority from sacred tradition and revelation to the individual or collective consciousness. It's my truth. It's what I feel is right in my heart. The ultimate authority becomes the self, not God or his church.
So when you put these 6 pillars together, agnosticism, immanentism, evolutionism, symbolism, relativism, subjectivism, you get a world where there is no hard, objective, eternal truth. Everything is fluid, personal, and changing.
And that is the aha moment for the listener. To the author of this journal, these aren't just different philosophical viewpoints to be debated in a university. They are poison, hell, and death.
Yeah.
Because if you accept these pillars, you dissolve the entire foundation of the faith. You make the church just a social club with nice symbols and good music.
And crucially, a social club cannot stop corporate demons. A social club cannot save souls from being farmed for their suffering.
That's the connection. The author believes this modernist philosophy is the virus that turned the church into a corpse. It's the operating system running on the clown-painted face mask. The mask smiles and says, we are evolving, we are listening, we are inclusive, all while the corpse underneath continues to rot.
Now, this philosophical shift has very real-world consequences, according to the text. Section 4 deals with the impact on society and even on other faiths. The author seems pretty nostalgic for the past.
Very nostalgic. The text specifically references the early 1970s and before as a kind of golden age.
Which is interesting because the 70s weren't exactly a quiet, idyllic time. You had Vietnam, Watergate, social upheaval. But I guess compared to the spiritual landscape the author sees now, it looked like paradise.
It's all relative, isn't it?
Yeah.
The author lists a set of values they believe have been lost. Sane, Christian, virtue-based, honorable, strong, confident, trusting, protective masculine values.
It's a very gendered list. The author specifically emphasizes protective masculine values. They list truth, justice, order, prudence, charity. And then they make this very specific, and I'd say contentious, observation. The depth of love that only men seem to be capable of, practice, and can be relied on.
It's a very contentious line. Only men.
Yeah.
It reflects a worldview where a specific type of patriarchal order is synonymous with divine order. The author explicitly links these masculine values with truth, justice, and order. In their mind, when that specific form of masculinity is eroded or attacked, it's not just a social change. It's a breakdown of society's entire spiritual defense mechanism.
So from their perspective, the modernist church has become effeminate, weak, and therefore unable to fight this ongoing spiritual war.
That's the argument, yes. It has laid down its arms. And speaking of defense mechanisms, the text then issues a direct warning to other religions. It addresses Muslims, Jews, Hindus, and all others.
This is the first they came for the Catholics argument, isn't it? The warning is, the synagogue of Satan will come for your faiths next.
It's a terrifying logic.
Yeah.
But the author claims that the Catholic Church was the primary target, the main fortress on the hill. Now that it's been hollowed out and replaced by this modernist corpse, there's nothing stopping the enemy from moving on to dismantle Islam, Judaism, Hinduism, and so on.
The text says, you must now know the synagogue of Satan will come for your faith next or soon. It portrays the Catholic Church as a fallen fortress that was, perhaps unknowingly, protecting the rest of the world. The kGQqJ, the biblical restrainer of evil, has been removed from the world.
And the author points out a trap, a kind of institutional checkmate. They say the only legal way within canon law to remove a heretical pope is for him to be judged by the bishops.
Right, but
according to the text, those bishops were intestinally advanced into those offices by the enemy specifically to prevent that very removal.
it's a catch-22, a perfect closed loop of corruption. The legal mechanism for saving the institution is controlled by the very people who are destroying it.
It's a depiction of total institutional capture. There is no internal solution left, which is why the author then offers an alliance.
In a way, a very grim one. They offer honorable assistance. But it comes with a chilling condition. The text says other faiths may be called upon to help cleanse the Catholic Church near you in blood or repentances.
In blood or repentances, that is not a subtle phrase.
No, it is not. It implies that the solution might not be peaceful debate. It suggests a scenario where the cleansing of the church involves actual violence, potentially aided by non-Catholics, against what the author sees as the heretical Catholic leadership.
It sounds like a plea for a multi-faith crusade against the Vatican itself.
That is a staggering thought. A traditional Catholic asking Muslims and Hindus to help them attack the institutional church in order to save the true faith.
It just shows how far down the rabbit hole the capture theory goes. For the author, the Vatican is no longer the center of the faith. It is enemy-occupied territory. And in a war, you take allies where you can find them, no matter how unlikely.
Which brings us to the author's internal state. You can really feel the tension in the writing. The sheer pressure of holding these beliefs must be immense.
That's section 5, the author's internal state and the solution. We have to talk about the just rage.
The author confesses to explicitly they write about a rage that has to be actively managed.
They say, and this is another direct quote, "If I'm not careful, I'm sure I could spend the rest of my life stabbing in the throat all."
Unrepented heretical modernists.
Whoa, stabbing in the throat. It's a moment of extreme vulnerability and extreme violence. The author is grappling with the raw, physical desire to destroy what they see as a spiritual evil. It's visceral. It shows how deep this sense of betrayal runs for them. It's not just a theological disagreement. It's a war for the survival of souls.
And if you genuinely believe you're watching the mass murder of souls,
your reaction would be extreme. If you saw someone murdering a child, you would feel a rage to stop them physically. The author feels they are witnessing the murder of millions of souls, and they're struggling with that same protective, violent impulse.
But then they describe a transition. There's a shift. They talk about moving from being blind to being able to see.
Yes, the realization of the truth about the 1958 capture, as terrifying as it is, acts as a cool evening breeze that resolves a hot, humid, exhausting, disorienting summer day.
That's such a relatable metaphor, even if the subject matter is extreme. The feeling of confusion, why is the church doing this? Why is the world like this? And then suddenly you find a theory that explains everything. And even if the theory is horrifying, the clarity it provides brings a strange kind of peace.
Exactly. Chaos is stressful. Conspiracy theories, even the darkest ones, offer order. They provide a narrative. They explain why things are bad. And for this author, knowing that it's all part of a plan assembled since the crucifixion is actually, in a twisted way, comforting.
How so?
Means God didn't fail. The church didn't fail. The enemy just made a very clever move in a very long war. It restores a sense of agency and meaning to the chaos.
So what is the move back? What is the proposed solution to all this? The title of the text is The Apologetic of Exorcism.
And that's what the author defines their task as. The apologetic of exorcism, cleansing, and resurrection of her, the church.
But they seem completely overwhelmed by it.
Utterly. They admit to not knowing where to start. They're debating with themselves whether the task is a resurrection versus a renewal of creation.
That's a huge difference. Resurrection implies bringing the dead thing back to life. Lazarus coming out of the tomb, the original body, but restored.
Whereas a renewal of creation implies starting over entirely. A complete divine reset of the universe. A new heaven and a new earth, as the book of Revelation says.
The scale is astronomical.
It is, and the author acknowledges it. They write, I'm going to need the Holy Ghost a lot. It's a moment of profound humility. They've spent years casting their intellect over history and dogma, preparing for this. But when they finally look at the magnitude of the evil they perceive, legal demons, captured papacies, global conspiracies, they realize a human solution isn't just insufficient, it's impossible.
I'm going to need the Holy Ghost. A lot. I feel like that one sentence sums up the entire energy of this document. It's one person standing against what they see as a multiverse of darkness, armed only with a journal and a prayer.
And a timeline. The author notes they have been preparing for many past years till tonight, that date, February 11th, 2026. They view this journal entry not as an end, but as the official commencement of this holy task, the beginning of the counteroffensive.
So let's zoom out. We've been deep in the weeds of index number 2235. What are the key takeaways for you as we step back?
Well, structurally, we have a very clear, if horrifying, narrative. A turning point in 1958, where the institution was hollowed out by a fraudulent leader. A hidden history of gray sterility that followed. A present reality where demonic forces are not just spiritual pests, but are actual corporate entities feeding on our spicy suffering.
And a future that requires nothing less than a total resurrection, not a reform, a resurrection.
And the core conflict driving all of this is between traditional dogma, which the author sees as objective, unchangeable divine truth, and the modernist synthesis of heresies, which dissolve that truth into subjective feelings and constant evolution.
That is the battlefield. The soul of the world is the prize. So why does this matter to the listener? Most of us probably aren't worrying about the legality of demonic incorporation on our commute to work today.
Perhaps not literally, but you should reflect on the concept of information warfare, taken to its absolute spiritual extreme. We live in an age where we are constantly told that our institutions are failing, that they've been captured, the hidden actors are pulling the strings behind the scenes. This text is the ultimate expression of that anxiety. It forces us to ask, what happens when you lose all faith in a structure, but you refuse to lose faith in the ideal it was supposed to represent?
It really forces you to consider the power of belief, the power of a narrative. The person who wrote this, their reality is completely fundamentally different from the reality of the person sitting next to them on the bus. Their history is different, their duty is different, their enemies are different.
And their sense of urgency is absolute. If you truly believed that your spiritual home was a corpse wearing a clown mask, and that your own suffering was literally feeding a dragon corporation that was terraforming the planet into hell, you would feel a just rage, too. It's a sobering reminder of how powerful a worldview can be in shaping human experience and motivation.
It raises a final provocative thought for me and for you, the listener. The text argues that the legal structures of the Vatican were captured. The elections happened, the papers were signed, everything was above board on the surface. But the spirit left. So here's the question. If an institution is legally captured by its antithesis and all internal mechanisms for correction are impossible, like the trap of the bishops that the author mentioned, is resurrection the only option left? And what does that even look like in a practical sense? Do you have to let the old thing die completely to save its soul? Can you fix a rotten foundation? Or do you eventually have to burn the whole house down and pray you can rebuild something new on the ashes?
That is the question of the ages, isn't it? Can you reform a system that has been perfectly engineered to resist reform? This author seems to be reaching for the matches, but praying for a miracle.
The Apologetic of Exorcism. A heavy title for a heavy time. Thank you for diving into this with us. It's been illuminating.
And terrifying.
Yeah.
But absolutely fascinating.
Always. To our listener, thanks for tuning in. Keep your eyes open and maybe check your own internal intentions today. You never know who or what might be watching. We'll see you on the next Deep Dive.